Right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the rearranged Shiur. Apologies to those who I didn't inform ahead of time that last night we couldn't do it, but it's good that we can catch up on a Tuesday morning if we need to. Right, so we left it last time. We'd just started to talk about the fourth bracha in Birkat Hamazon, in benching, the bracha of Hatov v'Hametiv. And I think we got as far as to say, if I'm not mistaken, that it was instituted by Lionel, by the Rabbonim of, yes, correct, after Bar Kokhba's time, yeah, the Rabbonim of Yavne. Okay, this was instituted by Chachmei Yavne. You'll be familiar with Yavne at the end of the period of the Second Temple. Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai, famous story with Vespasian. He was given, as it were, we'll give you three wishes, as it were, a bit like the genie out of the bottle. And one of his wishes was, Ten li Yavne v'chachameha. Give me Yavne and its Chachamim. And that was where the seat of learning went immediately after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE. The seat of learning went from Jerusalem to Yavne. From there afterwards, it went up north to the Galil, Tzipori, around that area. And that's where the Mishnah was put together. That's where the Gemara of the at least the Yerushalmi was put together. So this is the Tkufa, the period of time of Yavne. And Lionel quite rightly spoke about the Bar Kokhba revolt. The Bar Kokhba revolt, 135 CE. So what we're talking, 65 years after the destruction of the temple. And Bar Kokhba, whom, by the way, it's connected with this time of year because we know what do we celebrate on Lag BaOmer? We celebrate the so-called stopping of the plague of death of the students of Rabbi Akiva, which is what we were all taught at Cheder, wasn't it? That the students of Rabbi Akiva all died because
they talked against
they didn't talk nicely to one another, and right. What we weren't told in the in Cheder is that there's another opinion as to what was going on with this Bar Kokhba, with this Rabbi Akiva business, and that is that Rabbi Akiva, of course, was a big supporter of Bar Kokhba. Rabbi Akiva actually thought that Bar Kokhba originally was the Mashiach. Okay. Now we're not told that in Cheder because Rabbi Akiva, the great Rabbi Akiva, Chas v'sholom, he should make a mistake, right? But he threw his lot in with Bar Kokhba. He was a big supporter of Bar Kokhba, and presumably, and this is another reason why we're not told it, presumably because he was a big supporter of Bar Kokhba, he would have encouraged his students to fight with him, to sign up. Lehit gayes in modern language, to sign up. And there is strong opinion that this is what happened to his 24,000 students, was that they were killed in the Bar Kokhba revolt. So part of this Bar Kokhba revolt, Bar Kokhba was very successful initially. And so much so that there have been found quite a number of coins which were minted at that time. Those 3-year period, 135 to 132 CE. No, the other way around, 132 to 135, I think. To roll around about that time anyway. With Bar Kokhba on the coins. Bar Kokhba had this almost like independent state. It was not quite an independent state, but it was, it almost had some sort of elements of independence. And there's many coins with Bar Kokhba on. If you go to the Israel Museum, you can see lots of them there. But ultimately, the Bar Kokhba revolt was crushed by the Romans. They had to bring in a whole bunch of more legions, and they crushed the revolt. the main sort of final battle, as it were, was in a place called Beitar. Okay, Beitar, which is a town today, a city today, and the Beitar of then is around about that same place. I'm not sure it's exactly in that area, but it's very in that area, Beitar. And what happened in Beitar was that basically the revolt was once and for all crushed by the Romans. And according to the writings that we've got, hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed, literally hundreds of thousands. It's written, I think, 500,000, 600,000. Many, many, many people were killed. Now, those numbers are not to be taken literally. There probably weren't even 500,000 people in the whole country at that time. Certainly wouldn't have been 500,000 soldiers. But there were a very, very large number of people who were killed. And the Romans forbade, not only was it a disaster that these people were all killed, the Romans forbade burial. This was sort of, rubbing good old salt into the wounds. They weren't allowed to bury the dead. Imagine, huge number, never mind it's not 500,000, however many it is, there's a lot. Dead bodies piling up in the streets. It's not going to be long before the place is, strewn with disease and rats and all sorts of horrible things. So there was this thing. Now, according to the Gemara, these bodies, a miracle occurred, and they did not decompose. This was a chesed. It's almost it's almost like we call that a chesed. It would have been a greater chesed if they'd have been allowed to be buried. It'd have been a greater chesed still if they hadn't died. But that's what we do as Jews. We look for the chesed wherever we can find it. And this was a chesed from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this nace, this miracle that happened, that the bodies didn't decompose. Eventually, they were given permission to bury them. How long afterwards? Not sure exactly, but a significant period of time. They were allowed to bury them, and the bodies had not decomposed. And that was the catalyst for. Come to you in a sec, Hannah. I've just seen you've got your hand up. That was the catalyst for the Chachmei Yavne to make this bracha of Atov V'Ametiv. It's about, the bracha itself is about gratitude after loss. And that's the lesson that we need to be learning from this bracha, the gratitude that comes even after loss. Very easy when you've got a very terrible situation to throw everything and say, and it would be understandable. I for one would never criticize anybody who lost their faith after a terrible tragedy. It must be a very, very hard thing. We spoke about this in detail, didn't we, around about Yom HaShoah, when we spoke about all the different post-Holocaust theologies. There were those that said, that's it, I'm done with it all. I for one wouldn't, chas v'shalom, never, ever make any kind of criticism of a person that had gone through a terrible tragedy, whether a personal tragedy or a national tragedy, and lost faith. But those that didn't and were able to be still be grateful for the small things, that's a very high level of faith to achieve. And this is what this bracha is about. Yes, Hannah?
While you're talking about the miracle that was done, the thought has, not just this morning, but the thought over the last few months has crossed my mind as to how the bodies come back now from Gaza. In what state they're coming back, because we don't know. We said before, we don't know very much. I just wonder whether there isn't something happening there too.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't seen or read anything. But one second, Philip. I don't know. I haven't seen or read anything. But the same thought sort of occurred to me, not so much with the Gaza, but I was thinking yesterday when I read that a whole bunch of artifacts and personal effects of Eli Cohen, the hero spy who was in Syria. A lot of his personal effects. Now what we're talking about 60 years ago. A lot of his personal effects, including his last letter to his wife, his last handwritten will, all of these things have now been handed over in the last few days and have now been given back to his widow, Nadia, who must be an elderly lady now. And I was thinking, similar to Hannah, I was thinking about, maybe finally we will be able to lay to rest the remains of the hero of Israel, Eli Cohen. What state he's in? I mean, presumably, he's not. They won't have embalmed him, or mummified him. So presumably, he's just, his bones, as it were. But I don't know. But the same thing sort of occurred to me. One thing is for sure. We'll go to Philip in a second. But one thing's for sure, Hannah. They won't have treated, in my view, they will not have treated those bodies with the respect that was due to them. I'm pretty sure of that. Yes, Philip, what have you got to say?
Referring to what Hannah just said, I read an article that the pathologists have said that in their lifelong experience of doing pathology, they have never had such a hard time with remains of people, because they came back in plastic bags. I mean, you can't really know.
I'm sure it's horrendous. It's not the kind of thing that we need to. But you're right. You're right to raise it, because we're talking here. We are talking now about Hatov V'Ametiv, which was, and perhaps now in the last year and a half, I've only just thought of this, but perhaps really only now can we really appreciate this bracha. I've been saying this bracha for 60 years or more. And okay, I might have known about the origins of this for 40 years or more. Have I really given thought to what it meant about these bodies? I think that the fact that Hannah and Philip have raised these things now, it's not a nice thing to think about, not a nice thing to put your mind to about it. But if you think about it for a minute, and then you look at this bracha, you can perhaps realize why the Chachamim made this bracha. I was thinking perhaps, big deal. It would have been a greater chesed not to have happened in the first place, right? But it is a chesed. When you think about what Philip has just said, and I know that one of my boys who was drafted in his first Miluim thing in October, he was going around looking for,
body parts.
Yeah, body parts. So the fact that we can think about those horrible things now, perhaps this will give us a little bit more insight into this bracha. I think it's a very, very sort of apt thing that you raised there, Hannah. So let's just go into the bracha and see and have a look what's going on. It's so that the background is that finally they were allowed to bury the dead of Beitar, and the truth is that it's very difficult to mourn if you haven't got a burial. Look at poor Ruby and Chagit Chen, who their son Itai, Hashem Yikom Damav, was killed on October 7th. His body has not yet been returned, and they would not sit Shiva. They haven't sat Shiva yet. Halacha is that they should have, but that's a different story. They didn't want to sit Shiva until he gets a proper burial, and they haven't sat Shiva, and they're still fighting for him to come back to Kevei Yisrael to be given a Jewish burial. So we shouldn't, and in our day today, after the last year and a half, we can appreciate this bracha far more perhaps than we ever could before. This idea that after a disaster, at least we get the bodies back to be able to bury them, lefachot, at least. So it's something very, very poignant, really, for now. So that's the background to the bracha, so if we have a look, ask the question really. Birkat Hamazon is first and foremost a thank you to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for what? Food, physical sustenance, right? And what are we doing with a bracha about national tragedy in Birkat Hamazon? What's it doing there? And I think that is actually where we ended last time. That was the question we asked right at the end of last week's Shiur, is what's it doing there? And I did a little bit of research here, and I think that it goes a bit like this. The first three brachot have clear roots. First one thanks Hashem for food, Hazan et hakol, right? Who feeds everyone. Second bracha, Eretz Yisrael, al haaretz v'al hamazon, for the land and for the food. Third bracha, Yerushalayim, Ubnei Yerushalayim. We're getting into the particular. Hazan et hakol. We start off with the general, right? We thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for feeding the whole world, right? And then we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the land of Israel, okay, for us. And then we're going further narrowing it down to Yerushalayim. Once we get to Yerushalayim, we then think, oh, well, you know what? That's a natural bridge into something which actually I've written about for this week's article in the paper, and that is our thoughts on Yerushalayim. You'll see when it comes out, I've written an article about Yom Yerushalayim for this week. And the basic theme of the article is that we must never forget Yerushalayim and what it means to us. And that's where this comes in. This is how I view it. I don't think this is what I'm saying now is sort of particularly written in sources. It's the way I see it. We talk about food, we talk about the land, we talk about Yerushalayim, and it's almost like a reflex reaction. When you think of Yerushalayim, what do we think of with Yerushalayim? Im eshkachech Yerushalayim. If I forget you, Jerusalem. A wedding, we break a glass. You build a new house, you leave a section open. What do we say? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand lose its ability, right? It's that important to us. We started this whole series on Birkat Hamazon with what? With Al Naharot Bavel, by the rivers of Babylon, right? Remember, we started right at the beginning of that. We were meant to say Al Naharot Bavel every day. We don't say it on Shabbat. We say Shiur HaMa'alot instead. Shiur HaMa'alot refers to Shivat Tzion, the return to Tzion. So it's a sort of a less miserable version of Al Naharot Bavel. That's why we do it on Shabbat. But on that one sec, on Naharot Bavel is about mourning for the land, mourning for Jerusalem. So as soon as you mention Jerusalem, it's a bit like I imagine it's a bit like if when somebody loses chas v'sholom, loses a relative or loses or chas v'sholom if there's a divorce or something, and you mention that person that's no longer with you, there's a certain pain there that you no longer have it. And I think that's what's going on here with Yerushalayim. We mention Yerushalayim in the third bracha, and it's almost a reflex reaction that we no longer have Yerushalayim, and that's why they put it in, because it was very fresh. Remember, this was written after the Bar Kochba, we just said 65 years, less than 100 years after the Churban. So it's still very, very fresh. Yes, Warren.
I see it as the fourth blessing should really be the first blessing, because it's God's goodness. And then why is it God's goodness? Because he's given us the food, he's given us the land, he's given us...
Okay, I think if you don't know the background...
Please repeat what Lionel said.
Okay, that was Warren. What Warren said was he thinks it should be the first bracha because it's talking about God's goodness. And then we would go into, well, how is God so good? The food, the land, and Yerushalayim. That would fit as well. But I think and it would fit better if you didn't know the background as to why it was put in. Knowing why it was put in because of the Bar Kochba thing, because of the Beitar thing, it also fits where it is. The other thing, of course, is you wouldn't start with a D'Rabanan. The first three brachot are Deoraita, Torah laws. The fourth one is D'Rabanan. I'll go to Hannah now, but remind me when Hannah's finished to say something which is relevant to the fact that the fourth one is D'Rabanan. Yes, Hannah.
I took a different attitude to it. I thought that it's a bracha that shows God's kindness and his caring even after we die. God took the trouble to create a miracle that these bodies didn't decompose and were still in a fit state to be buried after 3 years. Or 3 years. And it shows it's another aspect of God's kindness, which doesn't necessarily finish when we die.
I get that, but it doesn't answer the question as to what it's doing in benching.
Because it's about, things that feeding us is to sustain our lives.
Okay, so okay, I get it. Okay, no, that's a fair comment. Yeah, so feeding us is sustaining our lives, and what we're saying is, even when we're no longer alive, our bodies are sustained. That fits. Yeah, that fits. I think that. No, you don't think so, Leslie? Not really. Okay, it's interesting. Why it's there? Interesting. Everyone can have their own view as to what it's doing there. However, what Chazal did say was that they should be there in after every meal. The dioraisa is v'achalta v'savata, right? You should eat, be satisfied, ubeirachta, and you should bench. How that benching is, whether those what that benching consists of, is worked out by the Rabbanan. And what the Rabbanan said was that the bracha that the Torah tells us, because of course the Torah doesn't tell us what the bracha is, just says ubeirachta, you shall make a bracha. The Chazal told us what that consists of, right? That bracha is those 3 brachot. It wasn't originally, no, because how can you add it and say it's a dioraisa? I suppose retrospectively it becomes a dioraisa because that's part of the bracha. However, you are right in that if you just say the first bracha and you don't say the others, you are actually yotze. We've said that. B'di'evid, you are yotze just with hazanet hakol. So maybe there's a second level of dioraita, but there's definitely it is definitely a distinction between the first 3 and the 4th one. And now this is what I wanted to say. I wanted you to remind me. Those when you bench with a cup, anyway, a cup of wine. Okay, you can't really see that on the thing. I've got an empty cup here. But let's assume this was full of wine and we were benching on a cup, yeah? Normally you bench on a cup, and sometimes people do it on Shabbat. We do it here on Sudash Lishit. If you bench at a Simcha, often you have wine and you say a Brei Pri Gofen at the end. What happens is that there's 2 minhagim as to when you put the cup down. There are some people, one opinion is that you put the cup down after Bonei Barachamav Yerushalayim Amen, because that's the dioraisa done, right? You're benching over the dioraisa. There are others. My minhag was always second. You put it down at Yechasreinu before the Harachamans, because the Harachamans are a definite add-on. Okay, pardon me. If you like, there's 3 levels, 4 levels even of brachot in benching. It's quite interesting, isn't it? Let's say it like this: the first bracha is a Premier League dioraita, right? Top end dioraita that you've got to say, Hazanet Olam, Hazanet Hakol, right? That's the first one. Second and third are also dioraita, but Lionel's question is how could it be, because they weren't even written then, which is a fair question, and I don't really know the answer, but they're still called dioraita. So call that second level, if you like. Third level is the Drabanan, which has been bolted on and has got a definite power to it, and you've got to say it. And then you've got the Harachamans, which are an add-on. How do we know the Harachamans are an add-on? Because you can add on all sorts of Harachamans. We've got new ones coming out all the time, right? After 1948, some people put Harachamanu Yevarechet Medinat Yisrael. Some people add in Harachamanu Yevarechet Chayalei Tzva Haganah Yisrael. And all sorts of things, which we will come to when we do the Harachamans. So that's sort of a 4th level. So there are people who put down their cup after Bonei Barachamav Yerushalayim Amen, because that's the dioraisa done. And there are others, like myself, who put it down after Yechasreinu. Okay, so that was one thing I wanted to remember. Right, so let's just have a look now at the source of all of this. This is in Gemara Brachot 48b. which we've talked about previously. Moshe tikein lachem liYisrael birkat hazon. Moshe made the first one, Yeshua the second one, David and Shlomo the third one. And then Gemara goes on to say, Hatova meitiv beyavne tiknuha al harugei beitar. Gemara says very clearly that in Yavne they made this about the dead of Beitar. It's historical, it's national, it's not about food. Okay, so let's have a look at the bracha. What does it say? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, which is interesting to start with, because they don't all begin with a full bracha, do they? Second one doesn't have a bracha at all at the beginning, and the third one doesn't have a bracha at all. Second one begins Nodeh, third one begins Rachem. Our fourth one begins with the full bracha. Okay, so Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. How does it go next? Okay, yeah, Caleb. I need to get it in front of me. I want to guess I'll get it wrong. There we go. Right. Hakel, our God. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Adirenu. Adir, yeah. Adir means glorious. And yeah. Adirenu, our glory. Borenu, our Creator. Goalenu, our Redeemer. Yotzarenu, another word for Creator.
Johnny, Adir means mighty.
Mighty, yes. Adir, mighty, yes. Adir that's probably a better translation. Adirenu, our mighty one, yes, agree. Yeah. Kadoshenu, our holy one. Kadosh Yaakov, the holy one of Yaakov. Why? Why Yaakov? Why not Yitzchak?
Because Yaakov became Israel.
Why not? Okay, why not Yisrael then? Why not Kadosh Yisrael? Why not Kadosh Yitzchak? Why not Kadosh Abraham?
Because all of Yaakov's children were holy and formed the 12 tribes of Israel.
They were a bunch of rascals. They were. They kidnapped their own brother. What are you talking about? Holy? They weren't holy.
No. Hannah is absolutely right. The Gemara talks about this. Yaakov was shalem. Yaakov was whole in all of his. None of his children.
His sons. She says his
none
sons
of his children. You get right. You're muted. That's 2 strikes and you're out. So Hannah is right. Yaakov is described as shalem. Whole, because none of his children went off the derech. Doesn't mean they didn't make mistakes. Of course, we all make mistakes. But Avraham had Yishmael, went off the derech. Yitzchak had Esav, went off the derech. Yaakov, all of his children, all of the Shvatim, all of the 12 tribes. I mean, you could argue that 10 of them went off the derech when the kingdom split. But ostensibly, the Shiftei Ka, the tribes of God, all of the children of Yaakov were considered to be Shalem. Hannah is right about that. So it could be that is why it's Kadosh Yaakov. It would make more sense to say Kadosh Yaakov. I wonder why it doesn't say Kadosh Yisrael. Don't know. Never occurred to me to ask, but maybe we'll look into that, why it says Kadosh Yaakov. But I think that's a good answer. I'm going with Hannah. Now, let's carry on. Ro'enu, our shepherd. Ro'ei Yisrael, the shepherd of Israel. Interesting, isn't it? Shepherds, what do shepherds do? They look after the flock. They look after their flock, and their flock are generally what? Yeah, and they're vulnerable, right? Sheep are very vulnerable. Sheep are very stupid animals, and they're also very vulnerable to predators. And of course, Yisrael are compared to sheep. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is called our shepherd. Interesting. Look at our leaders, our greatest leaders. Abraham, what was he? The shepherd. Yitzchak and Yaakov. Well, Yitzchak was more of a well digger, but he also had lots of sheep and cattle and stuff. Yaakov, the shepherd, right? He looked after Lavan's sheep. Moshe Rabbeinu, shepherd. David HaMelech, shepherd.
A shepherd.
Right? So the shepherd is a very common motif in our leader. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is often referred to as Ro'enu. We see ourselves, or we should see ourselves, as part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's flock. And the flock relies on, it doesn't know it. I think that's quite interesting as well. The sheep doesn't know that it relies on the shepherd because it's a very stupid animal. Maybe that's why we're compared to sheep, because very often we don't realize that we are so reliant on our shepherd, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I don't know, maybe. But Ro'enu is the idea of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a shepherd looking after us vulnerable sheep is a very common motif. Hamelech, the king. Now we come to it. Because what's the bracha called? The bracha is called Hatov HaMeitiv. Doesn't begin with that. We've had all that introduction of all Kadosh Baruch Hu's our king and our father and our mighty one and our holy one and our shepherd and all that stuff. And eventually we get to the crux of the bracha, Hatov, the good one, Hamelech Hatov, the good king, the Hameitiv Lakol. What's meitiv mean? Who does good.
Who brings good.
Yeah, it's a causative, who brings good,
Yeah.
Lakol. To everybody.
Everything, to everybody.
And maybe that's where Hannah's point comes in. What is the kol here? Not only everybody who's alive, everybody who's dead as well. Because this is the bracha recognizing the good of HaKadosh Baruch Hu for allowing those bodies not to decompose and to allowing them eventually to be buried. Okay? Va'ameitiv lakol. Maybe that's the idea that Hannah brought forward before is encompassed in that meitiv lakol. Shebechol yom vayom, on every single day, hu heitiv, he heitiv. No.
Past tense, he has.
Heitiv. Past tense. He did good. Hu meitiv, he does good. Who yetiv, who will do good. This is, past, present, and future. Heitiv, meitiv, yetiv. It's a good grammar lesson in Hebrew. Okay? Heitiv, he did good. Meitiv, he does good. Yetiv, he will do good. B'chol yom vayom. On every single day. Now, think about this. Why did they put that in there? What was this bracha all about? Bodies decomposing, right? Every single day was a separate miracle, wasn't it? If you, I don't know if any of you have been watching. We're only, apart from you, were here. We're all Anglos in the room, at least. Recently, there was a refuse collection strike in Birmingham, in England. And is it still not over? Okay, I haven't been following it carefully, but if you have a look there you go and have a look on the websites and what have you of what it looks like in Birmingham. Birmingham's a big city.
How long is this going on?
It's been going on for weeks. It's going on for weeks, right? And Birmingham is the second biggest city in England, a population of a couple of million. Imagine the refuse collectors. The place is full of it. I remember as a student, so it must be talking the late 70s. Remember there was a refuse strike in the late 70s in London. I was a student there, and I remember driving in. I used to get a lift from where I lived in Hendon into town where I was in university, and you would drive down the Euston Road, and there would be just piles and piles of black bags of rubbish all over the streets. And every single day that this went on, it got worse and worse, and the stink and the rats and everything. Imagine there you've got thousands of corpses. Every single day that they don't decompose is a separate miracle. And I think that that's why this is in here, Shebechol Yom Vayom. Every single day. And as Hannah said, it went on for a number of years even. I'm not quite sure exactly how long it went, but it was a long time. Every single day, and what's it teaching us? It's teaching us to be grateful for HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kindness on a daily basis, right? Every day when I go for a walk with my good lady around Ir Yamim, and we go down to the beach, and we walk along the coast bit there, and we walk up through the piano, and we think, we are so fortunate to live in this
Very.
wonderful place.
Very.
And we say it every day, and it's not like, unfortunately, when you daven and you say and you're not even thinking about what you're saying. I actually really mean it every time when I say, Baruch Hashem, we live in such a wonderful place. We're so blessed. And I really mean it. That's how we should mean benching. That's how we should mean all our davening. It's very hard, but that's how we're meant to do it. Shebechol yom v'yom. We're meant to recognize the gratitude that we should have for what we have and what we've been given every single day. When you live in this wonderful place like this and you're in this fantastic community that we're in, we've got to remember, we not take it for granted. We mustn't take it for granted. And that's what this is telling us. And maybe that's a reason, one of the reasons why Chachmei Yavne put it in after benching. Because, you ask people who've been in situations where they've not been able to eat, people who went through the Holocaust, people who were in the siege in Jerusalem in 1948, no doubt speak to some of the Gazan folk if they're being starved. Don't know if they are or not.
Talk to the Russians that were in Stalingrad.
Right. Talk to anybody who's been in a situation where food was very scarce. They will tell you after this, after that, Shebechol Yom V'Yom. I remember there was a guy who I used to go swimming with. I used to go before davening on a weekday day. I used to go to a swimming club back in Manchester. It was a Haredi swimming club. We used to hire the local swimming pool for an hour before Shacharis, 6:30 till 7:30, and they were all the Haredi guys used to go, and there were quite a number of Holocaust survivors there that used to go for this swim. And there was one particular guy who became very wealthy, and by this time he was very, well set up. He had grandchildren who were doing well. He told us that to this very day, he's passed away now, but to that very day, when he cut the challah and there were crumbs, he couldn't bear it. There were crumbs on the tablecloth. He would collect the crumbs. This was a wealthy guy by this time. He couldn't bear to see those crumbs go to waste because it reminded of him when he didn't have a crumb to eat.
That's the one thing my father told me. When he came out of Siberia, carried with him throughout the war a mouldy piece of bread which he had in his foot, and he couldn't let go of it, so because he was starving, and that was one thing he always did. Another thing he always used to do, when you had a butter, he used to take he could never just let the butter end when it ends. He had to lick the whole place. And the cucumber, with the juice, always used to drink it.
You mean like pickled?
Yeah.
Let me just say that for those who didn't hear it. Leslie, whose father was in Siberia, said that his father, after he came back from Siberia, carried with him a moldy piece of bread, basically wherever he went, because he just couldn't let go of that. When he had a jar of pickles, he would drink the pickle juice because he couldn't waste it. What was the other thing you said? And butter, he would lick the receptacle that the butter was in, whatever it was.
My default was concentration camp survivor. Would never leave any good this way.
Yeah, so Lionel said the same. His father, who was a survivor of a concentration camp, never leave food on his plate. This is Shebechol Yom V'Yom. That's why this bracha is in here. That we are so, we are so fortunate. My family were not Holocaust survivors, but my grandparents came to the UK in the early part of the 20th century, running from pogroms. My grandmother, who I remember very, very well. I was 16 when she passed away. She was 82. And she was well off by the time she died. She would not waste a thing, because when she came over from Romania, they didn't have diddly squat. They worked really, really hard for every single penny. Not to the same extent as Holocaust survivors who were in concentration camps didn't have what to eat, but there was no wastage. And I'll tell you something else. It goes through the generations, because for me, I hate waste. I can't stand it. Take my first cousin, who you all know, Jeffrey Glaske. It's a family joke. Jeffrey cannot walk past somebody else's plate and see somebody else's leavings. Can't do it. He'll eat it. That's why he's
No, there's no comment.
a big lad, right? This was ingrained in us, and we weren't even from a Holocaust family. We're from a family that were very, very careful because they came here and they had to work blooming hard before they could have anything on their wastage. I remember my grandmother would walk into Prestwich village. She was an elderly lady. She would walk into Prestwich village, 1.5 miles, to save the bus fare, 1.50 pennies, She could well afford 1.50 pennies, I remember my father once, she came back from somewhere on a train to Piccadilly station. It was already a very elderly lady. And she got the bus home from Piccadilly. And I remember my father saying, "Why didn't you get a taxi?" She said, "What? Are you mad? What's the matter with you, taxi?" He said, "Well, why didn't," and I remember this. She said, "Well, why didn't you ring me? I'd have come and got you." She said, "What? Do you think I've got a phone in my pocket?" Right? Every 6-year-old's got a phone in the pocket now. It's hilarious. But that was the whole idea. And that is why this is in here. Shebechol yom vayom hu heitiv hu meitiv hu yetiv lanu. You speak to your father, or my grandparents, and ask them, what does this mean that every day we should thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for what we've got? They'll tell you what it means. They'll tell you what it means. We need to remember that. We really do. I try very hard. I must be honest. It's one of the things I think I'm quite good at, and that is thinking about how blessed I am. But I'm sure I could do better, and I'm sure we could all do better to remember. We are very, very fortunate. Yes, Hannah.
Having said what you said about wastage, how do you deal with the Chad Pa'ami phenomenon in Israel? I agree with you. My mother was a Holocaust survivor, and I can't stand waste for the sake of waste. And I have a war with my daughter, who is very Chad Pa'ami, having 8 children. She's,
How many? How many? 8. Oh,
let me tell you how I deal. Let me tell you how I deal with that, Hannah. When I was in charge of this shul for a few years, one of the things we did was we did away with Chad Pa'ami for the Kiddush and for Sudah Shlishit, and we bought Rav Pa'ami. We bought 200 plates, 150 bowls. We got them nice and cheap in the market, melamine, good quality ones, and we used them over and over and over again, and we got rid of all Chad Pa'ami here in the shul. I'm sorry to say that is the case. They've gone back to Chad Pa'ami. Vayokom melech chodosh al Mitzrayim asher lo yada et Yosef. And now we've gone back to Chad Pa'ami, but I'm no longer in charge, and so I can't complain because it wouldn't be right. But that's how I dealt with it, Hannah. I'm absolutely against Chad Pa'ami. We don't use any Chad Pa'ami if we can help it. Right, let's carry on.
Who washed all the dishes after the Kiddush?
Well, we had a cleaner to do it, and we had a dishwasher that I used to fill 3 times, one after the other. And anyway. Chad Pa'ami means disposable. Chad Pa'ami, one use. Chad from Echad, Pa'ami, Pa'am, once. One use, so disposables. Rav Pa'ami, many uses, so that's non-disposable. Right, let's carry on. So, Shebechol Yom Vayom, Uhetiv, Umeitiv, Uyetiv, he did good, he is doing good, and he will do good. And now we've got a bit more grammar here. Hu Gamalanu.
He redeemed us.
No, not redeemed. Gamalanu. Gamal. What word does that know? Nobody? No. I want Ruby to I want Goldie to work this one out. No. What word do you do? What? Philip. Gold, keep calling you Ruby. Goldie, because I've got a niece called cousin called Ruby. That's why, who's a girl. Goldie, Gamil.
Kindness.
Yes, Gemilat Chesed. That's the root of the word. Well done, Goldie. Well done, Goldie. Gamalanu. He did kindness to us. The same word as Gemilat Chesed, right? Okay, so Gamalanu. He did kindness to us. What have you got translated in your art scroll there for Gamalanu, Leslie, please? Bountiful. Okay, bountiful. Bountiful means to be kind to us, yeah? Gamalanu is past tense.
no.
That's the next one. Gomlenu is a present. He was kind to us. Gomlenu, he is kind to us.
And
Who yigmalenu, he will be kind to us. It's the same thing as we had before. Past, present, future. Read out the whole section there, Leslie, in the art scroll.
He was bountiful with us. He is bountiful with us, and he will forever be bountiful.
Ah, that's because I didn't do the next word. La'ad means forever. Yeah. Okay, la'ad is forever. So, I mean, you've got the same art scroll there, Warren. So it's past tense. He was kind to us or bountiful. He is and he will be la'ad, forever. Again, it's recognizing the goodness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you had to sum up what this bracha is about, it's about recognition of the goodness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it is about, in two words in Hebrew, hakarat hatov, recognizing the good, being grateful. Lechein, for the grace, meaning chein, we've said this many, many times. What's chein? Chein is something we get for nothing. We don't deserve it. Chein is grace, something you get for nothing. Chesed, kindness. Ula rachamim, mercy. Ula revach,
Profit.
Revach, no, I wouldn't say Revach was joy.
Profit.
Hatzalah is, I would say, was relief. Hatzlacha is success. What have you got before Revach? Salvation.
Relief, salvation.
Okay, relief. So they translated Revach as relief. Revach is the same word, I think, as laharviach, isn't it? Laharviach, I think, which in modern Hebrew, laharviach means
profit.
to earn.
Profit.
Means to earn. Revach is profit. So Revach, well, how are they? What did you say it was? Relief. Okay, relief from poverty, maybe. I don't know. Okay, relief. Hatzalah. You know what Hatzalah is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hatzalah.
Saving.
You all know about
Saving.
the organization Hatzalah, right?
Yeah.
Hatzalah is just the Ashkenaz pronunciation of Hatzalah. Okay, Hatzalah. What does Hatzalah do? Saves you if you're in trouble, right? V'hatzlacha, success. So we are thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're recognizing that He did good to us. He is doing good to us, and He will do good to us forever for all these things. Chen, chesed, racham, mirel, getzlah, v'tzlacha. Not finished yet. Bracha, blessing. V'yeshua, salvation. Nechama, comfort. Right? What's that doing here? Because it's for about Beitar. They needed comforting. This was after a disaster. After a disaster, you also need all of those things, but you need comfort. Parnasa,
your livelihood.
Livelihood. Chalkala, another word for livelihood. Sustenance, yeah. Varachamim, again, kindness, mercy, chayim, life, shalom, peace, v'chol tov, and everything that's good. So we are recognizing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's bountifulness. Is that a word? Don't know. Bounty. We're recognizing it, but everything you could possibly think of. That's what this is. Bracha is saying. It rolls off the tongue, but actually, what it means is chol tov. Everything that comes from that is good comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we have to recognize that. Hard thing to do, because the opposite of that is something that we have to avoid. Kochi v'otzem yadi. Kochi v'otzem yadi. Kochi. Power v'otzem yadi, and the might of my hand. Asa li et ha'chayil hazeh. It's a pasuk in Sefer Dvarim. We have to avoid falling into the pitfall of saying kochi v'otzem yadi, my strength, kochi v'otzem yadi, and the power of my hand, asali, did for me, et ha'chayil hazeh. All that I have comes from me. My power and the might of my hand. And it's become an expression. Kochi v'otzem yadi means, it's all me. That's the opposite of what this bracha is. This bracha is designed to prevent us falling into the trap of saying, aren't I a big shot? Look at me. Everything that I've done is because I'm clever, because I'm strong, because I'm a genius, etc., etc. No, it's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, even if it is because you're a genius, who made you a genius, right? Who decided that you should have a better brain than him? Who should decided that you should be stronger than him, taller than him? Whatever it is that you are, it's all comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is very, very hard. I'm not saying that it's an easy thing to do. And certainly it's not an easy thing to recognize when we're gabbling off benching at a speed of knots. If you stop and you actually, of course, I'm not speaking to anybody here except myself. We all recognize that we all do this. But if we did it just, I don't know, once a week at least, do it properly. Say the words, understand the words, recognize what this is all about. It's a very humbling thing. This bracha is a very humbling bracha, right? Think about Beitar. Think about what they must have gone through. All those people that were slaughtered. Not only they slaughtered, they weren't allowed to be buried. And they were in exile. They were under the kosh of the Romans. Look at us. How grateful should we be? Who hative, who mative, who yative. How grateful should we be, right? Sorry? Yeah, but they were in exile from Yerushalayim. They were in Yavne. It is, okay, but all right. When I say exile, I mean, the temple had been destroyed. They were not sovereign, They weren't allowed to learn Torah. They weren't allowed to do bris milah, right? All those things that the Romans brought in that Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai was running away from, and that Rabbi Akiva got done for, right? Not a fun time. Not a fun time. Let's just finish it off. Umikol tuv, and from all of good, leolam, forever, al yichasreinu. This is now a prayer. This is now a prayer. It's turned from a recognition of everything. Yeah, it's turned from a recognition for everything Hashem has already done for us to a prayer to say, don't stop, right? You've been so good to us. Don't stop now. Le'olam, forevermore, al yichasreinu. Do not.
What's missing?
Yes, chaser. Don't make anything missing for us. It's a future tense. Yichasreinu. Yichasreinu, meaning do not in the future new.
What happened?
Oh, that's good language. Do not deprive us evermore, forevermore. Why is it no bracha at the end? Good question. Why is there a bracha at the beginning? Don't know. Why is there no bracha at the end? Don't know. Why is there no bracha at the beginning of no doubt? Don't know.
What's the matter with
Okay, so why doesn't it end with a bracha? Why does it have a chatima? I would say it doesn't have a chatima. Let me see if I'm right. I'm guessing here it doesn't have a chatima because it doesn't need one because it's all one sentence. When you say Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, borei nefashot rabot chesron kol mashe barasa l'shalos when nefesh kol chai baruch chayolamim, doesn't end with a bracha because it's one statement. I'm saying this is one statement. Look, if you look at the word, I'm guessing now, but I think it fits. Look at the words. There's no full stops in here. It's one long sentence. Right? If you'd get done if you wrote a sentence like this in English, right? When I write my articles and things, my first draft, the way I write them is I just write whatever comes into my head, right? I just drivel it out like verbal diarrhea, and then I go through it and I correct the grammar and I split up the sentences and I split up the paragraphs. If you ever read anything that I write, whether it's in the paper or any of my medical reports, they're very, very short paragraphs. Because that's how I like to read. I don't like long paragraphs and I don't like long, complicated sentences. Because I like short, punchy things, and so I think other people like that. This is one long sentence. Oh, good. What did it say?
Go to the whole thing, but just giving the end of it. The considerable outpouring of gratitude do not alter the fact that the true real essence does not require a double blessing. And it's a Rashi to Bracha 49a.
Okay, so there we go. If we were to get Brachas 49a out, Rashi would agree. Doesn't need it because it's just one thing. But it's a good question. Hannah has her hand up. Yes, Hannah.
Several things. Point of information, and I don't know how relevant it is. there's a concept. The kids came home once with a concept of what's a bracha, a long bracha, and a short bracha. Now, a long bracha, in what they learned is not a bracha with a large paragraph there. A short bracha is where you only have Baruch Atah Hashem, either at the beginning or at the end. A long bracha is where you have it at both ends, like
Correct.
bookends.
Correct.
Yeah. So here we've got a short bracha. Another thing, and I don't know how interested anybody is, but as I've said before, I say according to Eidot HaMizrach, which has been pretty much the same. Only here, Eidot HaMizrach stop after Hatzalah. They don't have all the things that relative to our lives currently. It goes Revach v'Hatzalah v'Chol Tov, and that's it. And then the Harachamamhus start.
That's interesting. Okay, so maybe we need to have a little. I have to admit, I am very, very far from an expert on anything to do with Eidot HaMizrach, but it'd be very interesting to know why there is a difference. Of course, their Chol Tov, the all good, I suppose, includes everything else. I wonder why the Nusach of Ashkenaz and Nusach Sfard, but basically non-Eidot HaMizrach, the Nusach of Ashkenaz, whether it's Nusach Sfard or Nusach Ashkenaz of Nusach Ashkenaz, if you know what I mean.
Sfard also says Rechol Tov.
Yes, we do, but we've got more in there. Don't know the answer to why, but it's an interesting observation. Okay,
there's one more thing. There's one more thing that's going to get your back up. There's a thing to do that's called a soul that is in our bodies that is our life essence. Yeah, we have a soul, and I think as far as I remember, when you bury somebody, then at night the soul is taken to the other world, to Olam Haba. And maybe part of Chachamim put this in because they were very connected to the spiritual side, and by the bodies not decomposing, the souls didn't suffer. Because if possibly, and I don't remember this too well, possibly if the bodies are not buried, the souls are trapped, and it's suffering for the soul.
I'm not so sure about that, and I'll tell you why I'm not sure about it. One of the halachas when a person passes away, one of the halachas of what you're meant to do immediately in the sort of laying out of the bodies, as it were. Unfortunately, because of the kind of work that I did, I was often first on the scene, if you like, when somebody passed away. And so I learned the halachas of what you're meant to do. The very first thing you're meant to do is to open a window.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're meant to open a window straight away. And the reason given for that is so that the neshama, it's said, hangs around for about 20 minutes and then flies away. And so you don't touch the body for 20 minutes, right? Even though you're meant to lay out the body, you're meant to put it on the floor in a certain position, etc. And I've done this many, many times as part of the thing that you do when you first encounter a dead person. But the very first thing you do is open a window and then do nothing for 20 minutes. And the idea is that the neshama has an exit. Now, of course, it's symbolic. The neshama doesn't need to go out of a window. It's all symbolic for us. But from that halacha, I understand that there is a concept that the neshama isn't trapped in the body and leaves fairly soon afterwards. Now, how that fits in, I don't know. You may well be right, Hannah. You may well be right that these are all sort of Kabbalistic things, which, as you know, I don't know anything about.
Wait a second. On the other hand, when you're sitting Shiva, you turn anything that's reflective, mirrors, pictures, or back from the wall to the wall, or cover them. So, and one of the explanations I was told, for doing this is so that you don't see a reflection of the soul in the mirror. Yeah.
Okay, so I've never heard that explanation, but you know, if that maybe what I understand is that you shouldn't see your own reflection, because it's very tempting when you see your own reflection to, you know, sort of mess with your hair and your makeup and all that kind of gear. And this is not a time for that. That's what I heard, but you may be right, Hannah. Okay, I'm not getting into souly things. You know me, I'm not really. It's beyond me.
I
Right.
appreciate that you let me at least voice them.
You can say whatever you like, Hannah. Okay, right. Let me just, before we finish Hatova Matey, just give me a second to go through my notes to see if there's anything that I want to just add on before we stop. And then next time we'll start with the Harachamans. I think we spoke about that. We spoke about this, the contemporary resonance with Holocaust survivors, and oh, that's the other thing. Imagine that you are a soldier today in Tzahal,
I
and
think about that all the time.
you know, and you have colleagues who you've left behind, and they haven't had their burial. Imagine how that must feel, right? Hard enough when you lose a colleague. Imagine you've left, you know, a colleague has been killed and he's still captive, or his body doesn't know where, we don't know where it is. Imagine how that must feel as a soldier. And when they say this bracha or tova meti, well, that's, you know, it's that's something that I just wanted to just make us think about for a minute. So again, Chazal, we've said this, I think, but just to summarize, Chazal placed it after meals, not to burden us, but to elevate our levels of gratitude and awareness of where all good comes from. Yeah, I think we've covered everything in my notes, so that's pretty good, really. Okay, so I think we will stop there. And we will hopefully next Monday night go back to Monday night next week. I don't think there's anything on that to interrupt that. And we will start with the Harachamans. The Rachamon section next week. Any questions before we go from anyone? No? Jolly good. Okay. See you all next week, if not before.